This is a very special 10-year anniversary of the podcast episode. And I'd actually say it was one of my favourite episodes in that decade. And that's because Jonathan and I asked each other questions we'd been asked by listeners, and they are juicy, personal, thought provoking, very deep questions indeed, as well as some, I guess, more light-hearted fun, but no less personal. And so, whether or not you're a long term listener or perhaps newer to the show, you'll get to hear aspects of ourselves and our experiences that perhaps you've never heard before. Let's dive in. Hello, Jonathan. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Good to be back as ever, and excited for this special show.
Not as excited as I am.
That's hard to beat.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to this. I feel like it's going to be such fun. So, to recap on what in the future I will have said in the intro, this is a very special 10-year episode, 10 years of doing this show. So I think I just want to take a moment for both of us to let that sink in, because I, for one, never imagined that we would still be doing this, still be creating the show a decade on.
This is classic Lian and Jonathan, where the opposite is the case for
me. That's so true. You knew. Yes, total surprise to me, total not a surprise to you. But it feels so good. It really does. As you know, the podcast has been a bit of a love-hate kind of journey for me over the years, and I think certainly in more recent years it's become more and more one of love, but something deeper than that, even, where it's just like deep alignment that goes beyond kind of like a personal sense of enjoyment, as much as, you know, that's much more been there present consistently over the last few years. It just feels like, funny enough, someone asked me yesterday why, or this week rather, something like, why do I even do the show? And it was interesting answering him. And I kind of said, it's got to the point where it almost just is. It just is the thing to do. It's just such a natural unfolding thing. But I'd love, before we even go into asking each other questions, I'd love to hear your sense on the show 10 years on, your relationship to it.
Well, first of all, I just have a real deep appreciation for the achievement of 10 years of running a podcast consistently for 10 years. You know, we know the stats out there for podcasts. There are very, very few that make it to such a milestone, and deeply, you know, being as intimately connected with it as I am, I deeply appreciate the material for liberation we've journeyed through along the way. And so it just fills me with a deep sense of appreciation, pride, incredibly proud of you, and the way our listeners, those and watch, I have to kind of say watchers and listeners now, don't we? Now we're on YouTube. Those who, the blessed souls who consume the content that goes out on this podcast. I just feel really, really proud of you for the way you've illuminated more and more of yourself. Obviously, I get to experience the fullness of you in all the ways, all the time. And when I was just struck there with just a real appreciation of how much more and more of you, those who it's aligned to, have got to witness. And that is truly a gift, and one that hasn't just happened. There's been lots of things that's aligned for that to happen. So that's the initial things that stir in me.
Oh, thank you. It's really brought emotion up hearing you say that. And there's two things that arose as you said that. It's funny because we hadn't planned to have this conversation at all, and now it feels like the most obvious and natural conversation to be in before we even go into asking each other the questions. One was, it's interesting that it was the podcast itself, I think, that really brought us together into that like alignment of realizing that we were greater than the sum of our parts. I was sort of starting to, and I think it was even your idea for me to, this is when we were met and we were sort of doing our own thing separately. And I think it was your idea for me to do a podcast, as in, like you were saying, I think you'd be great on a podcast, why don't you do it, and then help me do it. And then as we did that, it became more and more clear, like, why are we just doing these things separately? Why not just do things together? That's just dawned on me. So yeah, huge appreciation. Sorry.
And I may well have known that, but part of you also knew that because the first show you actually recorded, it was for the purposes of then writing it up, wasn't it? I think the Jamie Smart one was the first episode.
Yes.
And so there was a part of you that already kind of was working in that energy. And so when I was saying, let's create a podcast, and then somehow we got onto, well, in fact, I recorded the interview with Jamie just so I had the stuff there to be able to type out.
That's so, I'd forgotten that. My gosh, this is turned into this really spontaneous celebration of the podcast, which feels perfect, but totally was not our intention. Oh my gosh, I'd forgotten that. Yes. So I'd already been doing interviews, but written, like you say, where I would interview people, but then share them in written form. And I actually had a huge amount of fear around appearing kind of like on audio, as it were, and then certainly on video, which came much later. And the only reason, like you say, that it ended up being a recording with Jamie, and I think that was actually him that recorded it, not me, was he said, like, come to my house and let's do the interview there in person. He recorded it, not even me, and then that ended up being our very first episode. Thank you, Jamie. But yes, you're quite right. The podcast started in such a magical and organic way.
Yes, very much so.
Wow. But again, so testament to you and your seeing and your way of holding a vision and kind of nudging me towards it, despite all my best efforts to writhe and fight and resist. I can honestly say this podcast would not be a thing ever, but certainly not 10 years on, without you and your ability to do that, to see what needs to happen, hold that vision and really bring things in alignment to bring that to a creation.
Well, I think that I definitely feel that. And I also just want to say, if I was able to go back and speak to myself, or if we could bring the 10 years ago Jonathan on right now, and I was able to share with him how it had gone, I think he would have been surprised at how little of that actually was called of me. Yes, I've definitely been holding that energetic and that vision, but there's definitely a part of me that is surprised, somewhat a little surprised at how, in many ways, effortlessly, this became so natural to you. Because it is like, for me, the moment I met you, I'm like, oh my God, like you just come across so well on a podcast. You just had all the elements, but there was, I did envision, if someone says to me, right, we're going to be here in 10 years, I'd have been thinking, okay, this is going to require quite a lot of me to keep that consistency going. And again, in some ways I have, but I just want to kind of speak to, I would have definitely been surprised at how little of that in certain ways it was. Because like you were speaking to at the beginning, once it started, it's like, yeah, it was always meant to be this way. And that form of you expressing yourself, getting to geek out, getting to speak to all these amazing people, being able to form these incredible connections, being able to do all the everything when you get to interact with people live, like this is you. This is what you're here for. This is what you thrive at. This is, so much of, even just a part of it, but so much of the rich medicine you have for the world. So yeah, I just want to add that bit to it.
Thank you. Well, I love this. We're totally unintentional. It's ended up being this like really wonderful celebration of the show, but also the two of us and our partnership. I love this. One final thing that I want to say that came up when you said something like our listeners and also viewers that consume the content. It wasn't a correction. It was just interesting hearing that word consume and just realizing, I think more and more, the deeper we've gone with the kinds of explorations, journeys, even now, stories that we have on the show, there feels to me this increasing invitation to do so much more than consume. I think initially this was perhaps a less conscious intention, but more and more it's become a conscious intention that the episodes are really intended to be an activation, an inspiration, a calling to truth, um, a portal to take people into the depths. And it's like, yes, wonderful. Like if it starts off with it feeling like, oh, I'm just going to consume this podcast episode, wonderful. But it feels to me there's like increasingly such a deep invitation that lies beyond that too.
Certainly, yes. And consumption and consume is pretty much a loaded word in these times, certainly with capitalism and things like that. But really, just like any medicine, what do? You consume it, put it into your body itself, and so and then energetically go on that journey. And so, in one way, it is really fitting. But yeah, rightly so. Like you said, it's not. It's much more than that. It is and also because of what we're here for in terms of our lives and what those who are aligned with us are here for. We are incredibly discerning about what we energetically consume, how we choose to spend our time, what we choose to be in energetic union with. And so, yeah, with that level of discernment, it really carries a lot more to be on this sacred journey.
Okay, so we are going to ask each other now 2 to 4 questions that our community would love us to ask each other, and we don't know what those questions are, which I find personally thrilling. And we're going to go back and forth and see what magic gets created. And this might be a one-off. It might be, our intention is to do this as this 10-year celebration of this co-creation that's happened between us over the years. But it might be something that, if it goes well, if we enjoy it, if our listeners and viewers also enjoy it, it might be something that we do regularly. Let's see. So
let's do it.
Over to you. Ask me the first question.
Okay, so in honor of this 10-year anniversary, it feels aligned to start with a question relating to the podcast. And that question is, if you could go back in time 10 years and tell yourself something at the very outset of this podcasting journey, what would that be?
Oh, I love that. I love the fact it is related to the podcast. Oh, don't do it. Just don't do it, girl. You've no idea how hard it will be. Just don't do it. I'm joking. There's certainly been times over those years I've thought that, but looking at it from this place, I think I would go back and actually provide, I guess, it's not something that was new that I didn't know then, but it would almost be a kind of confirmation or a validation of, I'm going to talk about me personally, but I know the same is true for you. When we began the show, it wasn't from this kind of strategic this is a great form of marketing place. It was kind of like, just like we talked about, it was this very like emergent, spontaneous, it was kind of happening anyway. And then the first episode was recorded, but it wasn't even intended as a, like, you know, that says a lot about kind of what was animating me at the time. It was like, there is this stuff, this message that feels as though it wants to, oh my goodness, I'm going to use the C word, it wants to channel through me into the world. And it felt like it was just about honoring that without, you know, it's like, great if it turns into being these other things, you know, like a form of organic marketing, for example. But that certainly wasn't this like, oh, reverse engineer, how can we do organic marketing? Oh, a podcast would be a great way of doing it. It really didn't come from that place. And I look back, if I could go in direct answer to that question, great question, by the way, whoever asked this, if I could go back and speak to the Lian of a decade ago, I would just confirm, like, follow that. Like, I could really feel the emotion rising, actually. It's just like that part of you that can feel what's true, what needs to be created through you. Trust that always. That's it. That's it right there.
That is
Do
it.
that.
I feel that deeply. Beautiful. Okay, tears straight away. First question.
Yeah. Oh, so actually, I have a question for you that's along the same line. So I'm going to ask you that one now. Looking back on the past 10 years, what are you most proud of? And sort of like second follow-up question related. And is there anything you regret or would have liked to have done differently? So this obviously isn't podcast related, although it could be. It was more general. Do you want me to repeat that, or is that clear?
Yes, please. Repeat it.
Looking back on the past 10 years, what are you most proud of? And is there anything you regret or would have liked to have done differently?
Well, the first thing would be, as you alluded to, how I can hold the vision, how I can. I'm reminded of Churchill's quote, and this isn't. What I'm going to say is not directly related to the podcast. I think you know which one it's going to be. Is when you're going through hell, keep going, and that certainly isn't what the podcast is. But there is a. We speak to this often. The reason myself, there are many reasons why myself and Lian are such beautifully paired when it comes to being in a partnership, in a union, to be in service of what we're here for. And the big part for me is that patience, that diligence, that holding that vision. And even in the most challenging of moments, being at least where it's aligned and unwavering. And that's something that I'm most pleased and proud of. Just because of what it requires. It may be a gift of mine, but it's not one that's easy, let's say. It takes a lot of willpower to honor. And sorry, do remind me of the second part of the question, please.
This is from memory, but so I'm paraphrasing. Is there anything you regret or would like to be able to go back and have done differently?
I would have definitely personally have had more of me on the show. As we know, that's changing now. And there are significant reasons for that. But if I could change anything, if I could go back in time, basically from now to that point, I would definitely I would be more present on the podcast than what I had been, certainly in the early years.
Yeah, I hear that. It's how many have we done this year? Is this the 5th or 6th?
I believe at least the 5th, potentially the 6th. I think the 5th. What are we in July? We've done almost one a month. So I think at least 5, yes.
It feels something really like symbolic and significant and timely, that question and the way you've answered it is like that very thing is the thing that has changed this year. This is in some ways I'd say it's probably close to being true. The number of times you've been on the show this year is equal to the number of times you've been on the show over the whole decade. It's close to that. This year it will be.
Not maybe as much, but it's close. Put it that way. It really is. And yeah.
Yeah, love that. Okay, over to you for the next question.
All right. Okay, this is a bit of a big one. It may not be the easiest to answer, but it's the one where my energy is being drawn. What was the most powerful experience of your life?
Oh my goodness. I find this is where the Libran in me is just like, oh my God, how do I make a decision here? So I might have to, this isn't me swerving the question. It's when something is like that binary, I find it really hard to like choose between things. So I may answer, I'm going to close my eyes and kind of go inwards and see what arrives. And I'm not going to say it literally definitely is the most powerful, but it's the thing that's arising in this moment to speak about. Not that I know what it is yet, if that's okay. Because otherwise we'll be here for the next hour.
I knew when I was answering this. Yeah, I thought when I was going to answer this question, there's lots of layers in this, but I had a sense that something's going to come from it.
Okay. Would you ask it again? And I'll close my eyes, put all that kind of stuff to one side and just see what arises, please.
Sure. Lian Brook-Tyler, what was the most powerful experience of your life?
Gosh, so many different. I thought it was going to be simple. I thought there was going to be one clear, it's this, and I've had so many different ones arise. Okay, this is not the one I thought I was going to say, but it's the one that feels there to be said. So there's huge amounts of context and background to this that I don't have time to go into, some of which will be clear to people who have listened to the show for some time. But I was very, very resistant. And I don't even actually think resistance is quite the right word. It was just very clear it wasn't right for me to work with any kind of teacher plants or anything of that kind for much of my life. And again, I don't even think it was resistant in the way that it was like I should have done, but I was scared to. It feels to me it was actually correct that I didn't, until it was very clear it was time for me to do so. And I think there's many reasons why that's the case, that it actually wasn't right until it was. And at the point it was right, I was prepared to open fully to the mushroom and to have the experience that I can see in some ways I've been waiting a lifetime for. And the reason it was so powerful is it was in one night so many of the experiences I'd had across my lifetime that I'd been scared of, that I had resisted, that I tried to close down. Um, it was in that one experience I got to see who I am and why I'm made the way I am and why I've had those experiences and how they could be put to use even more profoundly than I'd had the opportunity to see in the years prior. And so it was so powerful because it was an experience of kind of opening me to me, but then also, as is always the case, is the closer we get to ourselves is also the closer we get to everything, the closer we get to God, to spirit. And it was at that experience that has provided almost a map or a blueprint that has guided me since. And is, in some ways I feel like I could probably spend the rest of my life still living out, still understanding, still integrating in kind of modern parlance, that experience. But yeah, again, to say it was the most powerful experience of my life perhaps isn't absolutely true, but it in this moment feels it's the one that wants to be spoken.
Well, thank you for speaking it. Incredibly beautiful and so incredibly precious.
Thank you to the mushroom.
Thank you. And blessings to the mushroom.
Okay, so okay, changing it up again. If you could give one piece of guidance, interesting the word guidance rather than advice, one piece of guidance to a young man who is struggling with life, what would it be? If you could give one piece of guidance to a young man who is struggling with life, what would it be?
This two came up straight away, and it's like trying to pick between two sons, something like that. Okay, yes. It would be quite simply go on a vision quest. Very simple, short answer. And also from that experience, because the other thing that came to mind just at presence was the very thing you're searching for is within, or is you, is as cliche as it sounds. And obviously it's through spending time with ourselves, disconnected from the world, deeply immersed in ourselves, that we get to experience that. And so, yeah, I would advise, I would give that guidance.
I don't know if it said and why, but I'm going to add and why. Did it say and why? I don't know if that was the last part of the. No, it wasn't. But I'm going to ask and why.
If there is a why, for me, for any young man, I don't believe there is a greater experience that one can do. I think this is the reason why when we look into just about every continent of the globe, this is what happens. Young men go on a rite of passage. Young boys, should I say, go on a rite of passage to become a man. That is the maturation process. That is the thing that right now, that is one of the things right now that is behind so much of the greed, the shadow, the insecurity, the fear that envelops, pervades, and drives a lot of the things that aren't honoring to life in this world. And if there was just one thing that from this point forward, if every young boy got to go on a vision quest, on that rite of passage to become a man, the world, would just be just the most incredibly beautiful place. And so that's some of the why. Not that that's not enough.
It's funny actually, because it feels as though there's a real parallel between the question you just asked me and your answer to that question, in that I'm guessing you would consider your maybe first vision quest, or maybe a different one of your vision quests, as being one of the most powerful experiences of your life. Would that be so?
Yes, certainly one of. Yes, no doubt about that. And there have been many, many vision quests since, and they have all been incredibly powerful. But yes, certainly that first one, which being me, I dove in 10 days. I just thought, I'm going in 10 days. What's this 3 and 4 day business? And it was certainly one of the most incredible experiences of my life.
And just to say, I think this is important to say, particularly as this is something we are now offering to our students, is to go to spend time with you in Ibiza and to be guided through a vision quest. They will likely be more like the 4-day kind of period. And I think it'd be helpful for you to speak to why that's the case. Like, what do you see is possible, and why that it feels like a kind of sweet spot for that, briefly, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. First of all, that is usually, again, when we look around the world to see what the length of time vision quests are, usually it's around 4 days and 4 nights. And there are, of course, the longer 40 days and 40 nights, like Jesus, Mohammed, the Buddha, and things like that are of longer things. But the 4 days is generally what is considered the sweet spot. And it's not just, it's one of them things that you get to see that just happens. It's just like a deep knowledge that either comes from the earth, or that is called or guided people to go on that period of time. But what is as important, and I can say as important, of the actual journey yourself, which you can only do on your own, is the bit that would come afterwards. And the bit that comes before is really important, but the bit that comes afterwards, where you would then meet an elder. Basically, that young boy would come back as a man, or before he came back, he would then meet an elder or a group of men that was in a place to be able to meet him and decipher and go on a journey with what came through to him, to help further illuminate and connect the dots for him, to really bring that into this beautiful constellation of this vision that he has for who he is, for what he's here for, and to bring that back into the village and therefore have that ripple out is so, it just gives me goosebumps, just even feeling into the power of that. And so, I'll leave that at that. Hopefully that was clear enough.
Yes, it absolutely is. I just felt important to ask you, given what you were saying about, you were kind of like went for the 10-day one, a bit like kind of dismissive of the shorter ones. And I know that's not how you feel. So I just wanted to give you the opportunity to speak to that from where you are now.
Yeah, it wasn't, it certainly wasn't dismissive. It was, I can tend to go,
extreme.
That's interesting. Just reflecting on that. I still the case. I was just feeling into that has changed, because that was a long time ago now. And I was just feeling into, that has changed quite a bit, where, maybe I'm not as, I don't know what the word is to describe that, but I can feel there is a shift at least.
I think I just asked you that question. Yes, so back over to you.
You did indeed. So this one, I'm going to go to Aurelia's questions and pick one from here, which is Lian's daughter. And This is a great one. I'm going to go for this one. If you were trapped on a desert island, what one spiritual item or not, which is would you bring?
Oh, she just to say before I answer that, she is the queen of the questions. Like she's known for it. She has these sort of stock few they're variants of, but like one of her favorites is to ask people, would you rather? And so an example of that would be she asks literally anyone she meets is open to be asked a question. One of them is, would you rather drown in water or soup? That's an example of one of those things. But she'll ask all sorts like, would you rather, I don't know, she'll say some sort of like, I don't in fact, I'm not going to go there because I'm then trying to manage like that doesn't sound very very politically correct. So I'm gonna leave that there. But just to say, she is the queen of the questions. So going back to
I will say the apple certainly doesn't fall far from the tree. Maybe not the type of questions, but the queen of questions at least.
So, oh gosh, that's a great one. So I'm going to go on the idea that certainly in the desert island I've landed on, there is a tree. There's already I'm kind of thinking of that, that sort of like emoji of a desert island that's got one palm. So this one might have more than one tree, but ultimately it's got at least one tree, and I know that that's that place I can go to connect, pray. So that feels clear. So from that place, if people are really getting an insight into how I am challenged sometimes to just answer a question, because it's like, oh my goodness, but there's this variable and that option, and then we might have to edit out some of the long pauses of me just thinking. It's really interesting. It's like I just have no answer to that. And there's something in that in itself.
What I was just feeling in that moment was to invite you to, as you did with maybe the first question, just to close your eyes and drop in. Because it's almost like I could feel when you go up there's just so many variables, but like it feels like there's a deep intuitive knowing.
Okay, I'm going to do that. And would you ask me again? And I'll answer from whatever arises.
I will. If you were trapped on a desert island, what one item, spiritual or not, would you bring?
Wow, it's so interesting what's just arisen, and it's really related to something you and I were talking about earlier, actually. And I'm not even going to explain why this might be the answer that's arisen. I'm just going to share it, and then we'll see what we both think of it. It was a mirror.
Wow.
And my sense is that's both literal but also symbolic.
So for me, I've got chills because I, as you know, live on the magical island of Ibiza, and one of its traits, it's known as the mirror, because it will show you everything about yourself, even the stuff you don't want to see. And so, like, with the moment you said that word, I got kind of chills running through me.
Yeah. You know what just occurs to me, actually? This is very present at the moment because I just yesterday recorded a follow-up episode with Jessica DeRuta, and we were talking about the, I guess, interweave of astrology and psychology. And we were talking about my stellium in Libra in the 7th house, which makes me very other orientated, very like wired for partnership. And it's kind of like natural for me, but it's like even deeper than natural. It's like almost essential for me to have that mirror of another person. And so looking at it through that lens, it's like, well, if I'm alone on a desert island, I need something that's going to provide that for me. And of course, it doesn't need to be an actual mirror. It doesn't even need to be an actual person. But it's interesting. I think there was this deeper instinctual sense of there needs to be something that provides that.
Yes. Yeah, I feel that so deeply. And knowing you, the island would be so beautiful anyway in lots of ways. So you could get so lost and captivated in this gloriousness that would be your island. That that essential, incredibly powerful medium or element of the mirror to really help you be with yourself, see yourself, feel yourself
on that paradise island.
So powerful. Yes.
Okay. Oh, this is a juicy one. I'm interested to see not just how you'll answer this, but kind of if you'll answer it. What is something that you've rarely or never spoken about publicly before that you feel ready to speak about now? Oh.
So as you know, I'm a pretty open person, but the publicly, such as on a podcast or something like that. So I'm trying to see through that lens. Let me just take a moment to feel into that. It's a really tricky one. Actually, I'm really struggling to think of something that I haven't somewhat publicly spoken to. But if I do it through the lens of this podcast publicly, as in people who aren't in our crucibles, let's say, who work with us and who we serve.
Can I just make a quick distinction here, because I think it might be helpful for listeners, that if you've journeyed with us in our, particularly our most intimate crucibles, like say, for example, medicine, Jonathan and I hold very little back. Like, part of the way that we work and we teach and invite others into, especially they're kind of like those wounds where we really are going to need to be in deep intimacy with some of the like most painful, shameful parts of us. We absolutely take our own medicine and walk our talk. And so I just want to give the context, the reason that Jonathan is kind of like, I feel really open because I've shared so much, is because that is our practice. That's our devotion, is to show up in those spaces in that way. And so there is actually a vast distinction between how we might show up in those spaces and how much we might share versus something like the podcast, where there just isn't the right space energetically set to do so. And I feel like that's something really important to name that before you then go on, because there is, again, that's really deeply intentional, woven into the way that we work and why we work that way. But sorry,
yes,
back over to you.
That is helpful. Thank you for sharing that and giving that context, because there really isn't much I can conceive of that I haven't shared. But what I'm feeling into, if I was going to meet a podcast listener, let's say, if I could share something that may surprise them, as for me as a man, as I can be a very I can just say it. I'm a very masculine man, but there is rarely a day goes by where I do not cry, and that is one of the most precious things in my life, where I cry just about every single day because I'm moved by love, by beauty, by a song, by a clip or a reel. And that one came up as just as one that may be surprising to everybody, and it's really part of my, as you know, Lian, but the listeners probably don't, as my life's work is grace. Gene Key 22 is to find the sweetness in the suffering, and I've had a very challenging life with pain and various illnesses from a very young age, and being able to be with the beauty of life that moves me to tears daily is something that's so precious, and as yet it's not something I've spoken about that much publicly, but obviously internally everyone knows and witnesses me crying in front of them often. So that's the one that comes to mind. But like you said, it's a tricky one to speak to.
Yeah, I love your answer. So, have we got time for one more? Are we done? I've got no idea how many you've asked me.
Yeah, I think so. At least one more each. So let me just. It's interesting because I was going to ask one that was. It's probably a bit too similar to the one you've just asked me. So let me just take a moment to see. Where is the most magical place you have been?
Gosh, I'll say before I answer that I've been fortunate to have visited a great many places, many of them very magical. I've travelled. It's funny because I'm in some ways such a kind of a home girl. What's the normal phrase of not saying home girl? Homebody, that's it. Home girl. I'm such a homebody, but that's juxtaposed with I've also travelled a lot and visited a great many places. And so I have a lot of places to pick from. And I'll say the kind of like the ones that came up as a potential response, but they're not the ones that I necessarily feel are the right answer in this moment. Certainly India was it felt like, and I think these are some of these might be like personal to me, like I had a real soul connection to India, which I kind of knew before I'd even visited it. And when I went there, I could just feel like, yes, there's part of me that's home here. The same is also true for Italy. I had that sense for years before I even took an Italian language evening class before I'd ever visited Italy or even had plans to do so, because I felt such a connection to the land and the language. And also Ibiza, as you know, I lived there as a child, and just such magical land, as you well know. And yet, despite saying all of that, it's the English land that there's no place I've been that has for me the magic of this land in a way that I'm able to open to an experience as distinctly and as profoundly. And there's many different places in this land that I felt that, but yeah, it's so interesting. I can go to the most beautiful, magical place, and then I come back and just even go to my local fields here, and I just feel this sense of I'm home, and there's nothing quite like the magic of this place, no matter where else I go.
Beautiful. I feel that so deeply. The home as well. That's what I felt when you went there. Beautiful.
Okay, one very quick last question for you. Well, we'll see.
I reckon I've got one more I want to ask.
Okay.
I was just looking, so just to let you know, I'm going to ask at least one.
Okay, here we go. If you had to drop all of your different practices and only keep one, what would it be and why?
Oh, that one's easy at the moment. And as you know, I am really, really deepening my practice of Qigong. A very particular type of Qigong, which is called Pangu, Pangu. And I actually do it for an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening. And I'm actually looking to increase that further, which may come a surprise to some, because I appreciate that's a significant amount of time. But as you know, Lian, I take where I align my time incredibly seriously. And so the very fact that out of them 24 hours in that cycle, I have 2 of those hours devoted to that practice, speaks volumes. So Pangu is what it would be.
There you go, short and sweet. Okay, do you want to ask the last question?
Indeed. Where are we? So, if you could whisper into everyone's ear in the world at the same time, in whatever their native language would be.
Oh my goodness, what a question. I feel like I want to ask all these questions of like, would they know that, how are they going to experience that? Is it, are they going to know it's someone whispering? Are they going to hear it as an internal voice? But I'm going to answer it from a place of me whispering it lands for them like a kind of deep inner knowing.
I was just about to say, knowing that it will land. Yes.
You are so loved. Yeah.
Simple as that, really.
And same question back at you.
Love aside, if I can move that aside, what comes through is you are what you've been searching for.
Wow, this has been a real pleasure and so much fun. I for one would love to do this again, but let's see. And this feels complete, and I've enjoyed this so much. Anything you would like to say on the experience of this show?
Well, I have also thoroughly enjoyed it, and I would also just on the back of what you just said there, should those who've either listened or watched this love to experience more of this, please send us your questions. Either drop them in the comments on YouTube or email them directly to us or on the social channels. And let's see how this lands, and we'll be able to tell based on the questions we get back.
Yes, I love that. So thank you so much for your questions. And if you would like to hear more of this, then let us know. But for now, I think we're complete. And again, I can't think of a better way to have celebrated 10 years of the podcast. Bless its soul.
Indeed. Let's do it again in another 10 years.
I very much hope you enjoyed watching that. And if you did, and you're not already subscribed, then do hit that bell thingy and subscribe to automatically get each fresh new episode as it's released each week. If you'd like to find out more about the work we do at Be Mythical to guide and support old souls in this new world to live their own unique myth, do hop along to bemythical.com and you'll find out all the ways you can join us and go deeper with us on your own mythical journey. Lots of love for now. Mwah. See you again next week.